Well, that was almost a disaster. I almost played the old intro music, which would have gotten us even in more trouble than the new old stuff. I need to update that here. Jason, that'll be my game plan here for the week. Welcome, Jason. CFL Week 5 coming off everything. Busy weekend, Canadian American sports. We had the 4th of July, a real holiday here. I enjoyed them singing the national anthem, I think I saw. For the Thursday game, I caught up on a lot of the games today, wins and losses, all of that stuff. We'll get to everything. Jason, hot bedroom, second floor here. I'm outside, didn't even bother showering before this one. No excuses today. Jason, how are you doing?
Doing good, Reed. Thanks for having me as always, and excited to talk about the games this week.
Yeah, I need to redo the intro here. We have a new logo. And then programming note, I don't know if we will have a Friday episode here for the next couple weeks, just news-wise. We'll do the recaps here. I'm enjoying that. I just don't know if they're like, do I track down Rob Vanstone to do 20 minutes on the Riders? And it's pretty dead in the UFL. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll work through all that. There's big breaking news, but we have a couple of vacations going up. I'm going to the Boston to watch the Mariners here coming up. We're going to the lake house here, not our lake house, but a rented lake house in a couple weeks. But talking through stuff today, Jason, the Mariners had to lose to the Toronto Blue Jays for the BC Lions to soar here. That was my talking point. You were at that game. We'll get through all of that. What was your thoughts? Weird weekend here because it's not really a Canadian holiday. I mean, you guys had Canada Day on my birthday and didn't play a game, and then you play on the 4th of July. What did you make here of the 4 games over the weekend?
Well, I mean, it was an interesting week, definitely. I think in terms of the first couple of games, there was a lot of quarterbacks that we haven't seen a ton of over the last couple of years. Shea Patterson getting his first career CFL start. That was interesting to see. Cameron Duke's continuing to get his feet wet as the starter in Toronto, and he kind of had a little bit of struggles in this game we'll get to. And then Friday, obviously, was Strevler versus Drew Brown. And then Drew Brown got injured, and we got to see Dustin Crum. So that was one thing that stood out about the first couple of games of the weekend. And then, Saturday we had a great game between Calgary Montreal, and let's not talk about the last game of the week.
Yeah, Jason, I was in a really good mood here because I was watching the game. It was my wife's birthday. She was taking a run, and then we were going to go to dinner. So I was watching the Mariners game, and then we were up huge on the Blue Jays, and that's really, competitive series, and everyone loves to come down, and we get all the Canadian fans, and we didn't go that we were out of town for the 4th, but normally we're here for at least one of the games, and you get all the Blue Jay fans coming down and taking over, which is the weirdest thing because it's like, I was trying to explain this to my wife, like we watch the Mariners at T-Mobile Park like every week, right? So I don't, like, if I'm at the game, I'm not getting into like a dueling chanting match against you that's coming into our house for like 2 or 3 days. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm here all the time. Like, you want to, get 15,000 people to come down and do it. Like, so you do, it's like heavy Blue Jays, and we're cheering all that stuff. And then the Blue Jays came back and we lost it in extra innings. We should have won it. Luke Raley would have had it was ground rule double. We lost. But then, the BC Lions made up for that against the Ticats. You sent me that over. It looked like at least you guys had fun pregame, right, before the game started. You had a music act, everything. What was going on there? Because it seemed like it was a fun sights and sounds.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So before every game this year, the Ticats, they redid the whole end zone there. So they have a new stage, and then they reworked where the concessions are. So there's this big area where they're having a pregame band play every home game. So, it's a good atmosphere. Gives another reason for teams, for people to come out that are more of the casual fan. And, I really enjoyed myself for that part of the game yesterday.
Yeah, I'm trying to update the banners here. Let's see if that works. There we go. And then we have Tim checking in here. Go, Alice, go. I will say, and I saw a tweet over the weekend, and I do think we haven't touched on this enough this season. I know we've had a lot of the punts, and I was on the CFL this week or whatever on the CFL Ticats network. We were talking a lot about the punt rules and all of that. Alouettes home games, unwatchable with the sound on. There's too many fans now because it was fine when there was like 10,000 people there, right? And the Owls were kind of middling. Okay, we're rebuilding, and we firing people and whatever else, and we're bringing in whatever. Excuse me. now that there's like 24,000 people there, whatever it is, unbearable. Get it off TV. I can't. I need an alternate audio feed because it is like it's totally overwhelming. Like I was watching the highlights again today. It says win, cut, win, cut, win. It's good for them. I mean, heck of a crowd. I mean, I'm seeing stories of like Michael Ball talking about this Regina have a CFL attendance problem. Certainly not Montreal right now. I mean, that was a hot game, and we'll talk about that. But, I mean, Alouettes look like the hottest team in the world right now. I mean, in any football league.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing about the attendance that I've always hypothesized is that, Toronto, BC, and Montreal are always seen as the three struggling CFL markets over the last 10 years, ever since I started watching the CFL. And my hypothesis is always that, when BC and Montreal have good competitive teams, the fans will come back. And I think we've seen that. Whereas Toronto, I don't think it really matters. We've seen them win Grey Cups and they've had some really good teams. They haven't really got that big attendance boost as a result. So it's really good to see the fans returning in Montreal, kind of to the glory days when Calvillo was there.
Yeah, so no, I mean, we make fun, and Tim, I mean, this is Tim. We can watch it in French. Do they translate the air horn sounds? I mean, I think it's probably the same sound whether it's in American English. I will say though, and just while we're checking in here, and Jason messaging me, really enjoying doing the recaps this year. I do as well. They're not really performing as great as I would like. So if you see these, thumbs up the videos, like it, do the algorithm stuff that way. If you see them on Twitter, thumbs up. You see them on Facebook. Because, this is, like I said, this might be all we do here for the next couple weeks. And I really like it as well. And I especially like, like I said before on here, the later Monday where I can really recap and kind of deep dive. Mondays coming here with a lot of stuff. Because sometimes, even like when Pat and I were doing the USFL, like Monday recaps, I'm like, okay, it's like 7 a.m, it's 8 a.m. Pacific. Like, okay, what's going on? But I do feel like I come in here, shots ready to go here. So I appreciate that. But no, Tim and everyone checking in, Chris and everyone else. But, thumbs up the videos, like all that stuff. But I appreciate that. Join the channel. 99 cents a month doesn't cost you anything. I appreciate that. BC here on top of the world, save for, Saskatchewan had what they got to buy here so far. So 4-0. We'll talk Saskatchewan here. We'll get to the BC game first, but Saskatchewan in the West, a wild scene here for the last couple seasons, at least for this podcast covering the CFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting to see, especially now that Trevor Harris isn't out there, how they would adjust. And I think the defense really stepped up for them this week. So if that trend continues and they can sneak a couple more wins in here before Trevor Harris gets back, I think, and we're not completely sure when that's going to be. I think that's going to be huge for this team. I still like BC to finish first in the West, going forward, even though they are behind in the standings right now. But I think Saskatchewan's very well positioned.
Well, and that was the thing. I mean, this week, I'm trying to pull up the schedule so I can look forward to next week. It felt almost like a mulligan, right? Okay, Harris is out. Like Shea Patterson. Let's see how Shea's doing here. And we joked, and I was on the CFL this week and everything else about, well, he was in the USFL and kind of was duty, and then coming up here, like he really didn't even have to do that much. I mean, it really felt like the defense, and I don't want to get too deep dive into that right now, but it didn't feel like he had a phenomenal game here. It felt like the Saskatchewan defense really kind of took care of business.
Well, I think the key thing is that he didn't make mistakes, unlike Toronto's quarterback, Cameron Dukes, who kind of unraveled down the stretch with all those interceptions. So I think, Patterson, he was shaky to start this game. I thought that I was like, oh no, this game's going to go by the wayside pretty quickly for Saskatchewan, but he settled in and ultimately didn't make those key mistakes.
Yeah, no, I think Cameron Dukes was like, well, people want me to be Chad Kelly. I need to fill in for Chad Kelly, and I need to throw a bunch of interceptions. That seemed to be the game plan that Cameron Dukes was coming in and doing all that. Yeah, just looking ahead here. Next week, big game here, right? Riders and I know the BC, I think Matt Baker was tweeting out, they're opening the upper deck and the Watermelon Bowl and all of that stuff. I mean, that should be rocking next week. I can't imagine, especially Saturday, 4:00 here. And, we don't have the Thursday, 7:00 game or whatever in Vancouver. That's got to be, I would have to imagine, the game of the week, right? Well, Toronto, Alouettes. I don't know. This week looks pretty good. What's your game of the week? Just early thoughts here.
I would go with Calgary and Winnipeg just because I think it's one of those games that can really pivot the standings, because Winnipeg wins that game. All of a sudden, they're third the West, and they're, right back on track to kind of being a playoff team this year. But if Calgary wins, they can bounce back from their poor second half showing against Montreal. I think that would be huge for them going forward and really kind of burying Winnipeg in the standings.
Yeah, I was going to say, I forgot to. Yeah. Hey, congratulations, Winnipeg. You won a game. That's great. That's great. Better than Hamilton. Yeah, Jody checking in here. Jody's a member. We always read your comments if you're a member. BC looked dominant. Sask looked average. Toronto looked like garbage. Yeah, lots to talk through here. Let's get to, we'll go back, reverse chronological order here. Like I said, we were watching the Blue Jays, and then we go out to this game. I saw, Nick Kowalski tweeting that Vernon Adams, if he continues playing at this clip, is like 6,700 yards and all these crazy accolades. I mean, Vernon's having a heck of a season. We had Stanback kind of had his coming out party here. Bo didn't look terrible, right? I mean, it's just the defense here. I mean, Bo throws for almost 400 yards. You got to figure that's a win. You were there in person. What did you make of this?
Well, I do think the stat line for Bo is a little misleading because a lot of those yards came late in the game, but I can't really blame him for this loss because this game was over by the end of the first quarter, really. I think BC had almost 30 points a few minutes into the second quarter, and at that point, the game was pretty much over. I think this was one of the worst performances I've seen from a defensive secondary in the CFL in quite some time. I mean, all credit to BC's receivers, but they were getting wide open for some of these touchdowns. And, it's just very disheartening to see as a Ticat fan because we've seen this movie before with Mark Washington's defense. I've listened to other Ticats podcasts. They've said the same thing for the last couple years. The play calling has just been too conservative on the defensive back side of things. I think they play too much off coverage, and then I think at the end of the day, they haven't been able to get that secondary right, whether it's the pieces or just the scheme. I think it's been a big problem for the Ticats over the last couple of years, and it's really coming to a head this year. And it's, I think it's going to cost them the season. I think 0-5. Yeah, we'll talk about the 0-5 BC Lions that went on to win the Grey Cup all you want, but I think ultimately I'm almost ready to stick a fork in this team.
Yeah, I was watching the game, and then we were going, Dorothy, we went out for dinner last night. So I caught up on a lot of this today, but I'm getting the messages in our group chat. Like Andy Murray's basically like Vernon and Justin McInnes are just like playing catch out there. Like this isn't even like really a competitive. And yeah, like you said, a lot of wide. I like seeing Stanback kind of get involved early. We've talked about that kind of his slow start. I don't know. 14 for 82. Are we seeing maybe more of him, catching the ball, running in for that touchdown? You saw that with James Butler as well, kind of figuring out different ways to use them. I don't know. Is Stanback doing enough here now? I know we were down on the signing, him coming to BC. Are they utilizing him better now?
Well, I think the thing with him is I think that later in the year is going to be more of the true test when they get more into those cold weather games and having to rely more on the running game. I think this team is really designed to be such a lethal team early in the season with their passing attack, and that we really saw that early in this game. And I think with Stanback, that one play, that touchdown that he got, that was one of the most wide open I've ever seen a running back going, just running a fly pattern down the sideline. It was quite ridiculous on the part of the Ticats defense. But Stanback, yeah, I think this was the best game we've seen from him so far with BC. He is getting a little bit better each week, more accustomed to that offense. So I think you're going to see some good signs there, but I'm not really all in on him just yet as being really the big difference maker that a lot of people thought he would be when he came to BC.
I would agree with that. I think, and I was at that, what was it? The Winnipeg, BC, the one before the big, playoff, whatever, or the before, whatever, to kind of figure out who was going to have first place in the division last year. And yeah, BC and BC place and Vernon sitting there, and okay, we got all the weapons running out there and kind of digging the dive in. And then we go to IG Field in the semifinals or whatever, and Oliveira's running through, and the BC defenders are just hanging on him, like trying to, 6 people just trying to get him to stop. And I thought that really encapsulated kind of the difference of the football. And I think that's a key you point out. It's one thing to, put 44 points on the Ticats here in July. Yeah, it's another thing to kind of do the same thing in Winnipeg in November. I think that's an interesting point. We'll have to see. I mean, early on, this is great, but I'm glad BC took care of business against Hamilton. I mean, to me, that's expected, right? This shouldn't be the should be the expectation, not the exception, that we got able to come in and do that. Does BC do more for this win, or are you as high on them as you were before?
I think it just really showcases their ceiling. I think when they're playing at their best, this is the highest ceiling. And with all due respect to Montreal, the highest ceiling offense in the CFL. I think Montreal's defense is certainly better than BC's, but I think in terms of the offensive firepower that they can throw at you, I think BC is definitely the best team in the CFL, and we really saw that in this game. McInnes and Hollins, what a duo we're starting to see early in this season with those guys. Those guys are going to have crazy numbers by season's end. And like I said, in this game was a great game for them to rack up the yards against that Ticats defense.
Yeah, and Keon Hatcher, right? I mean, still waiting for him to come. I mean, this isn't even kind of the full suite, right, of talent that BC is going to have.
Yeah, most certainly. And I think,
go for it.
Sorry.
I don't have anything.
I thought that sorry. I think that Hatcher getting back, and I think that is going to be sooner than we thought, because I think they did say that TJ Lee and him are practicing already, so that is a really good sign for BC.
Like you talked about here, so misleading stat line here, Bo with the 3 TDs here, Butler not doing a ton, right? Obviously, he had the 1 receiving touchdown for that. 0-5, like you said, I mean, they got to play the rest of the season here. What do you do if you're Hamilton?
I mean, I really don't know, because they, unless they make that change at defensive coordinator, I think that is really the obvious move, but I'm not too sure if they're going to do that, because I believe Mark Washington and Orlando Steinauer, who's still the football operations head in Hamilton, are very close. And, he's kind of stood by him like for a number of years now. I think he's been the DC since 19, but the defense has got progressively worse, like I've been saying. And I think, I think that would be the obvious move, but I don't think they're going to do it. I think they've already moved around the secondary and, mixed and matched the pieces that they're starting back there. So I think ultimately they're running out of options in terms of what they're going to do, because I don't think they can really expect much more out of this offense. But, the defense has just been so bad so far this year, and the special teams, they made the coordinator switch a week ago, so I don't know what else you can do in that regard too. So I'm struggling for answers for this team right now.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, they took the big swing here. I remember going into last year, and we're going to do all this with Bo, and it just, I mean, the injuries and everything last year, and then now you have what you kind of envision this to look like, right? And it's just not enough. I was looking at the standings here, and obviously Montreal is kind of in a league of its own here, and then you have Toronto and Ottawa, and I would certainly be higher on Toronto right now than Ottawa, and we get your thoughts on that. But I don't know, like you said, Hamilton 0-5 here, anything can happen, but it seems like they've really dug their hole here on the east side.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if they had won this game, which I kind of had a hope in my head that, Hamilton would be able to pull this one out and miraculously win this game, because the last couple of years they've won a couple of games against teams that we, they were total shockers. I mean, they beat Winnipeg a couple of years ago when Dane Evans threw those 5 touchdown passes. They beat BC last year when they went to BC Place. So I thought maybe they get one of those games. They have all the motivation in the world being 0-4, but ultimately they just didn't show up to play once again in this game. And like I said, I'm getting quite tired of it. And a sad story to pass along. It was in the Hamilton Spectator. There was a guy that is dealing with a lot of chronic illnesses, and I'm not too sure what illnesses he was dealing with, but he had multiple surgeries throughout his lifetime, and he decided that he was going to medically end his life. And basically, he's a lifelong Tiger Cats fan. He said, "I'm going to watch this last game on Sunday night, and then I'm going to assisted dying on Monday." So just really sad to see that be the guy's last game. And I was kind of thinking about that story as the game progressed last night.
That's crazy. Wow. I've got, at least, honor his life and everything else and being a fan. And I do think the CFL does a good job of that. And we've had certain tragedies kind of involved in the CFL family, at least in the time that we've been involved in this. And I think the league and certainly the writers and everyone involved always do a good job of talking about some of those fans. In terms of like the last thing I had on this game, and just to veer heavily into my comedic timing here, but the Gray Bowl I thought was an insane decision. I don't know whose job that was to do, and I love like the Made in the Hammer tie cats. Like I love all that stuff and that branding, right? Because that was like their alt jersey they rolled out last year, right? Like the dark gray and all that.
Yeah.
I love that, but you can't have the fog away jersey with BC. We needed to talk through that. That was interesting.
Yeah, what an oversight by the CFL. How did they not see? How did nobody step up and say, like, look, this is going to be a pain in the butt for the broadcast to show two teams wearing essentially just two different shades of gray on the field. And literally the BC is like the only team in the league that has a gray away uniform. So like they could have done this game against any other team, any other home game this season for the Ticats. But ultimately they decided to do it against BC. And just a weird uniform matchup.
I would like to see, and I know this isn't like necessarily, the BC Lions is more of like the burnt orange, right? Kind of their branding. And I have the jersey that the people gave us, but like, we have the Seahawks have like their action green, right? Like that's the Thursday night green they play. And I love it. You get a lot of people that are like, this is, sacrilegious, whatever. Hey, it's either you're talking about it, whether you like it or not. And I wish that they had that just like a bright orange, like a traffic cone orange. Cause you have the blackout, the fog's okay. I like that. Like, oh, it's the fog. That's our away color. But then I wish they would have kind of like that, like an alt, just not the burnt orange, just like a, traffic hazard light orange. I think would be really cool for that. Jason's shaking his head, but not a fan of the action green.
Yeah, well, not a huge fan of the action green. I find it just kind of like a blinding kind of shade of a color, but I think I would be on board with a color rush, set of jerseys for each CFL team. I think that would be fun, and maybe you could feature them on the Thursday nights just like the NFL does.
Last thing about this, and we'll move on. I was going to say, just like you said, you thought that we've seen BC drop games, and this is the thing. Like while Winnipeg is injured here, right, and presuming, and we'll get to Saskatchewan. I do not think Saskatchewan maintains this clip the entire season. I'll maybe happy to be wrong about that. And if Cory Mace is the greatest first year coach in the history of mankind, that'd be awesome. But like. You need to. These are the games you need to win. You need to win these right now. Build your league because with Winnipeg, if somehow Palpatine's returned or whatever, we need to be able to get this going. So I like that taking care of business because I was scared. Like, okay, we're going to go in here. It's the Sunday game. It's the long weekend, and then we're gonna, lay an egg. So I'm glad to see. Anything else on this one? I know it's kind of like PTSD to have you go back over this Hamilton loss. Anything else on this one?
Well, I think for BC, I think the biggest thing is consistency. Just like you said, I think we've seen this team lay an egg, times before the last couple of years when they've had a very good team. So I think, consistency is the biggest thing for this team because obviously when you see games like this, their ceiling is just so high.
All right, let's get to, and I guess we're going reverse course here. This one, and you had texted me. This is a wild game. We were coming back from the lake. I caught up on this one today. Alouettes almost blew it, right? Almost whatever. Came back here, against the Jake Mayer, Tommy Stevens kind of experiment for Calgary. Cody, a couple of interceptions here. He had a couple of big runs. What did you make of this? The comeback and ultimately put the game on ice?
Well, my first takeaway with this game is that it was very, very physical from the onset. You just saw so many big hits. There were so many short yardage plays where, the offensive lineman moved the pile. Like it was just a really physical game. And Calgary came out in that first half and really matched Montreal and even exceeded Montreal from the physical aspect of the game. Tommy Stevens, he was a monster in the first half of this game. I mean, he had the one short yardage play where he ran around the outside to Nathan Rourke and ran for 40 yards. And then there was another one where they faked to go in short yards and he threw a pass. And there was also other plays where, he just won those matchups, like I said, moving the pile. I think Calgary did a really good job early on in this game, and I think they came out with a pretty good defensive game plan as well. But ultimately, they couldn't maintain it in the second half. Montreal's coaching staff had a lot of great second half adjustments. I think offensively, they really just got cooking in the second half. Fajardo was something like 15 of 16 in the second half or something crazy like that. They just had no answer for them. And ultimately, Montreal was able to really get back in the rhythm and come back and win this game because Calgary's offense really couldn't get anything going in the second half. Jake Maier, I mean, I just really to support this guy at this point because he just, I think he's definitely can be like the 6th or 7th best starting quarterback in the CFL on any given year. But what's that really going to do for you? I just don't think he has much upside because he's not willing to push the ball down the field. And it's apparent that Dave Dickinson, when he's calling this offense, doesn't really trust him to do that. So I think at the end of the day, very disheartening performance if you're looking for Jake Maier to show some promise this year. I mean, look, 106 yards is not going to cut it in any level of football, let alone in the CFL when it's more of a passing league. So I think at the end of the day, it was a very disappointing performance from him, especially because they built that first half lead and ultimately had a 14-point lead at one point.
Tim Capper, this is really just living the best life here. I have 5-0 Alouettes. Had the honor to shake Ricky Ray's hand post game in Montreal.
Nice.
That's good. Just Tim just said, I'll just drop kind of stuff in there. Tim goes, live in the world here. Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. The Jake Maier thing, it's just because it's like season started out, I thought we felt good on Calgary. I thought Calgary played hard. Jake was pushing the ball. He wasn't, but yeah, you see this 18 of 28, 106 yards, like it's insane. I don't know. It's just such an insane difference here. I don't even know what Cody 35, 42, 374, 2-2. Jake's like a third of everything. It's just a really weird kind of dichotomy they have here with Calgary. I just don't know. And we talked. We talked about this before on the podcast. Ryan coming on with 3 down. And what's the expectations this year? Calgary was a playoff team, but I don't think that's good enough. It doesn't seem to me like that. Just making the playoffs, kind of limping in, is any good here. I mean, obviously Calgary is not going to make any changes here, but it's weird because the NFL, you get 8 or 9 teams that are fine, just kind of being middling, but just Derek Carr is our quarterback, and we're going to win 5 games, and we're going to be fine. And because there's just so many teams that are I don't know if you can do that in the CFL and go year after year with Jake Maier here. If that's but I don't know what's the alternative. I mean, he's playing well enough. I mean, you can't really bench Jake and be like, we're going to bring in someone else. What would you do if you were Calgary?
Well, I would certainly still ride it out this year unless he gets to a certain, point where, you want to see what Matthew Schultz can do. But ultimately, I don't think he's an answer either. I think he's proven to just be a guy that you start for a handful of games, and that's about it. But yeah, John Hodge put out something that I definitely agree with. He said that Jake Maier has evidently regressed every start this season. He had a very good game against Hamilton week 1, and then against BC looked pretty good. The numbers maybe are a little bit deceiving in that game. And then week 3, he didn't have as good of a game against Winnipeg. They still got the victory, but this week he really, cratered down to earth, and we'll have to see how he bounces back as they have Winnipeg on the schedule next week.
I don't know. Like I said, I like Jake. I think he's a good guy. It's one of those, you're talking, do you go to Schiltz? We're going to talk Argos here. And they're like, we need to go to Arbuckle. It's like, okay, we know what some of these, and then we'll get to that. But it's we know what some of these guys are. You know what I mean? We know what some of these guys are. And it's I don't know. I'm a Commanders fan. We got Daniels now. They're bringing in Mariota, and that's fine. And he'll be a backup. And obviously with Oregon and the number 1 pick, kind of all that stuff. But he comes in, you kind of know what he is at this point. And I don't know. Yeah, if you go to Schultz, I'm kind of at a loss for words with this. See Christian saying you got to start Schultz, but we've seen Schultz, right? I mean, I feel like you have a big enough track record on both of these guys at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another thing with Schultz is that he is very injury prone. So even if he has, some promise that he shows, I think he's only going to last a few games. That's really what he's shown throughout his CFL career. I mean, I take it from personal experience, see him in Hamilton the last couple of years. I mean, there was times where I wanted to buy into him as being the full-time starter here in Hamilton, but every time I did so, it looked like he was on the injured list. So I think at the end of the day, that's one thing Mayer has shown in the CFL career, his ability to stay healthy and get through the grind of a CFL season. But at the end of the day, I just think the upside is really lacking with him, and it's becoming very apparent week after week.
Yeah, Jeff here checking in. I totally agree about the horns. Too annoying. You don't need those horns and you have big numbers. Yeah, it's outweighing the people that are there in attendance for the millions that are watching, high hundreds of thousands of people that are watching online. That to me is I don't know. I think you have to prioritize that, but we've seen the CFL with that forever. And I remember even when they had like the COVID or what was it coming out of COVID, like we couldn't bring certain things in, and you could only bring in. Oh, I want to bring in the air horns. Like, you can't bring in the air horns because I don't know. I think you need to. You got your money's tied up in TSN. If Tim said you move the mics on the field, whatever, but I think you got to prioritize that. It's the bigger audience. If you got 500,000 people online or on TV watching versus 20,000 there, I think you got to make that priority. But that's just me. I've said that before, but I think it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they don't annoy me as much, but I can certainly, see how it would be annoying for some people. I think I saw something on Twitter, X, and somebody was saying that they've sat behind the person with the air horn before, and they said that it wasn't nearly as annoying in person as it was on the broadcast. So, that's really interesting, I thought. And, I think the CFL and the TSN can do something about this.
Yeah, I liked how we had, like I said, we played in the Blue Jays here this weekend, and I would say all 3 games the officiating was subpar, and I mean obviously it seemed to be more towards the Mariners, but it was subpar regardless of whatever. Watching the games, the umpires were not great in the strike zone, and I like saying that they were on the metric system, and that they needed to bring in American umpires to kind of get that back on the imperial system. I thought that was funny. Alouettes here, right? Undefeated, greatest team in the world here at this point. Continue to look great. Obviously, what I think was on the broadcast, what they say, like they've only trailed whatever for 5 minutes the entire season or whatever. But having to have a comeback is cool and all that. What did you learn, if anything, from the Alouettes?
Well, if anything, it just shows that they can come back in these style of games. I mean, like you said, last year you rarely saw them when they were winning games coming back from deficits. And I think this is a team that has proven now that they can overcome deficits like that, because when you're trailing in a football game, as we all know, it's much harder. It's like a different, it's really hard to attack a defense than it is when you're have a lead or it's a tied game. So I think at the end of the day, it's really impressive what the Alouettes have really transformed into the past couple of weeks. They've kind of turned into this juggernaut passing attack all of a sudden. Cody Fajardo, all the confidence in the world. Like, look at the amount of rushing attempts that this team did. And a lot of that was due to them trailing in the game. But I think, when they passed the ball 42 times and they only run the ball, 12 times the entire game, I think that shows you the confidence that Cody Fajardo has now in year 2 in this Jason Moss system in Montreal. And I think at the end of the day, so many guys are playing well for this team right now. Walter Fletcher, like I said a couple weeks ago, looks like an upgrade on William Stanback at the running back position. I just like what he can do as a receiver to the backfield. His ability to hit the home run, I think, is one of the best running backs in the CFL at doing so. Tyson Philpott, got to give a lot of credit to Cliff for that prediction in the preseason. I mean, that guy looks like a beast. He's really breaking out this year, even beyond the player that he was before. So a lot of credit to that team and what they're able to do. And they certainly look like the best CFL team at this point.
Yeah, no, Philpott, because what was it? It was Julian Grant's first touchdown, right? They were saying, because Philpott had obviously came off the hot start there and even into the opening game. I want to develop like a trust scale in terms of like what we have with the teams here. Like what would I trust the CFL team? Like the Montreal Alouettes, like we could be out of the country. Like you could stay at my house, like watch my kids, watch my pet. Like I have total trust in the Alouettes. Like BC Lions are like, okay, maybe you could stay at the house. Like you could use the microwave, but nothing like flammable, right? Nothing with gas. Like I want to develop this like trust. What's the trust scale here, right? Like, but because I mean, even when the Alouettes are down, because like I said, I was getting the score updates, we were getting back. I'm like, Alouettes are going to come back and win this game. I mean, there's no chance that they lose this game at home to Calgary. Like, I just have complete trust in them right now. Really just impressive to see. I mean, we've heaped praises on all of this before, but I'll have to figure out who's my least trusted team here. Maybe by the end of the show, we'll figure that out. I don't know if it's Hamilton. I mean, Hamilton might, I don't know, would Hamilton burn the house down? Jason might say that. They might, no, don't leave them there. Don't burn your house down. But yeah, Tim second here. Cody checked last year, 12-12 and 10-10. I mean, Cody's on top of the world. I've said this. I've said Cody winning the Grey Cup, life changing, legacy changing. You're in the history books. You bet on yourself. It proved right. It's sports is half talent, and then half of it is mentality and knowing you can do it. I mean, we saw the Mariners, not to bring it up again, but, we know they have the capabilities to hit the ball with people on base. We had bases loaded the last 3 innings. We lose to the Blue Jays 5-4. I don't think that's a talent issue. I think that's a mentality of we can't hit the ball right now issue. And so, yeah, I think Cody is on a different level. Anything else? Highlights for the Alouettes or lowlights for the Stampeders? I don't know. I mean, what, they're 2-2 here, right? They have they're in the West. How are you feeling? I think Calgary's all right.
Yeah, I mean, like you can look at it glass half empty, glass half full kind of thing. I think they've looked generally pretty good the first 4 games, but ultimately they didn't win those key games against BC and Montreal this week against the 2 best teams that they played. And I thought, like I said, they played those teams pretty well and competitively. But I think, like I said, the upside of this team and just like you don't trust this team to close out games the last couple of years. I've really my confidence has really waned in them compared to what it was like a handful of years ago. This team was the organization, like you said, in terms of the trust meter, they would be at the 100% trust. They're going to come back and win every game. And I think at the end of the day, I don't really trust Calgary at this point to be anything more than that average playoff team that probably gets knocked out in that West semifinal. So I think at the end of the day, that's kind of where I expect this seasons to go.
All right, let's go in here. So Winnipeg. Oh my God, we finally got a win here. The people don't have to throw trash on the field, run out of the field, kind of all this stuff. Injuries, right? Drew Brown wasn't great. We got some Crum sanity. I mean, Ottawa really didn't do much of anything. I got just ran the ball everywhere, right? Kind of doing it that way. Strevler. Interesting player, right? I think it's the easiest job to kind of be the backup quarterback in waiting, and you came in, but hey, I mean, Strevler got the victory here. I saw at least the highlights I was seeing. A lot of we're tucking, running, and that's what we kind of saw when he was at preseason with the Jets and things. And I think he's good for that, but I think it's a lot of like not panic, but just like, okay, I'm running the ball here. Like I don't, and that's the difference between someone like, Chris, maybe Zach, where if Zach's playing, he's viewing the field a little bit more, be able to throw it that way. What did you make of Strevler coming in here, getting the win?
Well, I mean, this game was one of the first games this season where I was watching the first half and I was like, man, this is an ugly football game. I thought this was a tough watch the first half, but ultimately it did get better as the game went on. And I think with Winnipeg, what they discovered, because they had some struggles offensively in the first half, in the second half, they really leaned into that athleticism of Strevler, and they said, screw this traditional kind of passing attack. We're going to go and take advantage of Strevler's legs and really feed the ball to Brady Oliveira and really get him going. And both of those guys really had excellent games down the stretch of this game. And ultimately, I think Claris apparently is only going to miss the 1 week, I think I saw Darren Bombing saying. So I think at the end of the day, they didn't win this game, and that's really what matters. And then for Ottawa, I think that, this is a very big missed opportunity for them because I really wanted them to show me something in this game. I really thought that this is a chance for them to make a statement and say, this team is different than the past couple of years, and, going on the road and sweeping Winnipeg this season. But ultimately, with Winnipeg looking shaky early on in this game, Ottawa didn't do anything to take advantage. And, it was very disheartening, even when Drew Brown was in the game. We'll get to that. But I think at the end of the day, very disappointing to see from the Redblacks in this game.
Is there the weakest receiving group of any of the teams in the CFL?
I would not say. Like, I think when you look at them on paper, this team is pretty good. Like, they have some, like their 1 to 4 receivers, I think, have all produced, well in the CFL in their careers. But yeah, I think Dominic Rhymes has been a disappointment so far in his return to Ottawa, which is kind of baffling to me given the seasons he's had the last couple years in BC. Justin Hardy's looked pretty good, I thought. He's kind of been their go-to guy early on this season. But yeah, I wouldn't say they're the worst in terms of when you look at their best receivers, just 1 to 4 in the league. But I would actually even say Winnipeg, with all their injuries, is arguably the worst right now. But I think at the end of the day, they're just not getting enough production. They're not generating enough big plays. The running game's doing very well this season, right? While Armstead was a really nice find for them in the running game. But I think at the end of the day, unless they get that passing game going, it's very hard to win games consistently in the CFL. But like I said, it's still early in the season, and I think we have seen enough good things from Drew Brown, assuming he's healthy going forward, to continue seeing this experiment play out.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if like Ackland or whatever is like the guy. I don't know. It just, to me, when I watch and they're trying, to me, Ottawa is still just the most confusing franchise of like, I just don't really know what their identity is. And we want to, like at least now, like, okay, the Riders, we play good defense. As long as you have a quarterback that doesn't throw the game away, we can kind of be in there and maintain all that. And obviously Winnipeg, we saw Willie Jefferson kind of finally wake up this week and realize he's a football player and kind of be involved in that kind of stuff. But I don't know. To me, Ottawa, there's just not enough there where you have, we saw the Cornelius experiment. Okay, we're going to have a subpar quarterback, but surround him with a bunch of good receivers. Like, to me, I don't know. To me, Brown, we're still trying to kind of figure out what he is. We don't have the number 1 receiver, just in my opinion. Obviously, you can disagree with that, but I don't know. To me, this is really kind of a meddling team, and I thought they were kind of, we thought they were going to be different this year coming in, and certainly not. And obviously, the injuries. Did Crum? Crum Sanity didn't run wild. Did he do anything to earn anything at this point, or is it just break glass here injury? We got to play him.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really overly impress, in my opinion. The first play he came in, I believe it was one of those a complete lateral throw, a swing pass off to the left, and it was ruled a fumble, and that ultimately took points off the board for Ottawa when they were in field goal range late in the second quarter. So that was a bad start. And then he had a strip sack from Willie Jefferson, who looks a lot better the last couple of weeks after a slow start to the season for Winnipeg. But yeah, I think Crum still looks more like an athlete than a passer. That's how I would describe it. I think he's a guy that you still see that potential for those big runs, down the field. But I think at the end of the day, you have to be able to beat teams from the pocket and, make plays with your arm in order to win games in this league. And I don't know if he's a guy you can really trust, but it's really hard to tell when you're thrown into a game, mid-game like this. I would have to see him start, a couple more games, like the goal games, that is, to get a better read on where he is in year 2. But I think at the end of the day, they're better off rolling back with Drew Brown. I don't think there's really any quarterback controversy at this point.
No, and I agree with that, where Crum was kind of like, he came in, it was crazy, and then the next week, it's like, oh my God, he's running through everybody. And then like the next week, okay, then they kind of figured it out. And they're like, okay, we're shutting this down. I mean, I think that's the same thing with Straveler. Like, I don't think this is a sustainable, over the course of the season. I mean, he can come in and give some challenges, and like, he can throw the ball right. I mean, he's gonna make some passes, but obviously not anything out of the park. But like, he's kind of the same. It to me is that's a run first. Okay, then if I really need to, I'll kind of survey the field and figure that out. I mean, this good for Winnipeg really would have kind of been a disaster start to the season here. Have they done enough? You saw Calgary, everything. Do you think Winnipeg's on the upswing here once Caleros comes back, or is it back to kind of the same? Because it was like he was lighting the world on fire before.
Yeah, I do like their chances to make the playoffs, especially with how Calgary's been looking. I think the teams out east, other than Montreal, all looked pretty shaky to me right now. I think we didn't really we're going to touch on it when we talked about the Toronto-Saskatchewan game, but I think Toronto's starting to look pretty shaky the last couple of weeks, and they do not have a very easy schedule coming up, so we'll have to see how that plays out. So I do like Winnipeg's chances to make the playoffs, especially with that game against Calgary next week. I expect them to win because Caleros will be back, and I think games in Winnipeg as well. So I think ultimately they will probably get that win and get back on track, leapfrog Calgary in the standings. And I think at the end of the day, like if they make the playoffs, because in 2019 they were the third place team in the West, and they ultimately went on a big run to win the Grey Cup. I think as long as this team makes the playoffs, they're always going to be a threat, considering all the veteran pieces that they have, and if they can get healthy down the stretch, that's a good sign for them. But like you said, not firing on all cylinders by any means to this point of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I think this week 6, I mean, this Ottawa Edmonton game, just to see if Edmonton can kind of get their life together here and if can do anything. But I mean, the other 3 of these games, I mean, Sask and BC is I know you want to see Winnipeg and everything else with that, but I mean, this is good. Can Toronto figure this out here going in? Montreal hosting again. I thought that was odd that this was. I think they said the first week that Toronto had been on the road, and I know they had the bye week and all of that, so that was kind of weird, but. Yeah, I mean, this should be exciting. I don't know, Calgary, you had your shot here, and, Winnipeg was bleeding a little bit. Like you said, if Winnipeg bounces back over and gets the win and leapfrogs them there. Anything else from this one? Anything else from Crum or Brown, Strevler, or anything else with Winnipeg?
Yeah, I'll give a couple of shout-outs to players. Like I said, Brady Oliveira looked much more like his 2023 MOP level self this week for Winnipeg. I think Willie Jefferson starting to show a lot more signs of being that impact player on the defensive line. They definitely need him. Winnipeg's defense in general is looking a lot better the last couple of weeks. Devontae Dedman, kick returner for the Redblacks, really looking like his old self. I mean, he's had a lot of injuries the last couple of years, but when he's in there, in terms of like all-time returners that I've seen in the CFL, he's right up there in terms of the ceiling. And then DeAndre Lamont, who's a defensive back for Ottawa, I think he's had a couple of really nice games for the Redblacks the last couple of weeks.
Well, we'll see here. They got to figure it out. Let's go last one, and then we can talk through anything else here before we get out. I predicted this was going to be a homicide. I predicted the wrong quarterback here, where I thought that Shea Patterson was going to get eaten alive. Fine. I mean, defense really kind of carried the day on this one. Dukes, 4 interceptions. Like I said, the top kind of wanted to do his best Chad Kelly impression with that. I know Mike Mitchell had an article already out today for Sports Illustrated that Coach Dinwiddie's talking about, we need to do a 2-headed quarterback monster here. We need to play more than Nick Arbuckle. Can we see Brian Scott here at all? Like, why are we going back to Arbuckle with this? What did you make, I guess, first of all, of that? Duke's really falling apart. We're seeing Arbuckle there at the end. Thoughts on kind of the Toronto quarterback? Because Duke's had really been on top of the world here for the first few weeks.
Well, it's interesting because in the first half, I thought Dukes made, and throughout this game, I thought he had a handful of excellent plays that he made. But ultimately, it was the mistakes late in this game that really cost his team. And I think that's really what it comes down to in football sometimes. I think that Shea Patterson, like I said, did not have a very, productive game in this game, but ultimately he didn't make any of those mistakes, whereas Cameron Dukes, I think 3 of the last 4 drives or something like that in the fourth quarter ended in an interception, and ultimately that's really what did Toronto in. And I think going forward, I think this is a team, and I hate to say it, I hate to even bring them up, but this team's gonna miss Chad Kelly. It looks like there is quite a step down from Chad Kelly going to Cameron Dukes, as we really expected going into the season. I know Dukes has looked very good. He definitely has the makings of a guy that has a future in the CFL. I think he definitely has the mobility and maybe not the biggest arm in the world, but he can throw with timing and rhythm. And I think he has shown some ability, but ultimately, he's still very inexperienced. And I think, we just didn't see any games like this from Chad Kelly last year other than the East Finals. So I think at the end of the day, we'll have to see how he bounces back from this, but Arbuckle was not the answer. I do not want to see Nick Arbuckle on the CFL field. I thought I was honestly shocked when they signed him in training camp, but obviously he has the familiarity with playing for Brian Dinwiddie before, so I guess there's that, but he's just not an exciting option. I'd rather see them go trade for like Mazzoli or somebody from somebody around the league. So I think at the end of the day, Arbuckle is just not an exciting option at all. I don't think he provides this team with any more upside than Cameron Dukes already does. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out with these quarterbacks in Toronto.
I mean, the thing with Chad Kelly is, does he come back, minimum 9 game? Right, he was kind of in training camp, kind of not. We had the whole thing, and he was we did all the kind of stuff. Like, does he come back, and then it takes 3-4 weeks to really get up to speed, and then we're going into whatever the heck that would be, through September. I just don't know, like, what's the learning curve on that to kind of get him back up to speed, and having not really played any football since last November. Just I don't know. I'll be curious for that. For Saskatchewan here. Shea Patterson, right? Because I was looking at Harris out for at least another 5 games, right? Is Shea? They're 5-0 here. I mean, they're playing BC next week. I would be, I don't know. I guess what is your thoughts on that game? Because I don't see Patterson like beating BC right with his arm, even though BC's defense is kind of shaky as we've seen that. So I guess what do you see from that one? Because that to me is the true test here to kind of be able to replicate it 2 weeks in a row.
Well, what really comes down to is that defense for Saskatchewan. I think that they played really well in this game. I think especially down the stretch was forcing all those turnovers. I think that was really the key in this game. If they can do the same to Vernon Adams, who is really on top of the world right now, I think and all due respect to Cody Fajardo, who's playing incredible football right now, but I would have to say Vernon Adams right now is the best quarterback in the CFL, and I think that's really the key. Defensively, if they can keep the points low, force some turnovers against BC, I think that's what will give them the best shot, because if this game turns into a shootout, I have no faith in Shea Patterson to be able to keep up with the BC Lions, and I think at the end of the day, Saskatchewan has a lot of pieces on that offense that I really like, but they haven't really been able to fully unleash AJ Ouellette so far this year. He's gotten lots of attempts. I believe he leads the league in carries, or it's around the league lead in carries. But at the end of the day, hasn't been able to put up the best efficiency in that regard. And then the receiving core has a lot of talent, but you have to have someone to get him the ball. And I think Patterson is, until we see more from him and more consistency and more upside, I have no trust in him to do so.
Another shout out I wanted to give to Mario Alford here, right, for Saskatchewan. Special teams really coming into play, right? Didn't he have the punt return, right? Am I making that up? And then Cory Mace was like dabbing him up on the sideline. Seemed really excited for that. I like seeing kind of the players coach with that. I mean, Cory Mace has a really good thing right now. I mean, 5-0 Riders. Are you surprised him finding such early success here coming in?
Well, I mean, it must be noted that Saskatchewan did start pretty well the last couple of years and then fell apart down the stretch. So we'll have to see. But Cory Mace have been really, really impressed early on this season. Like I said, I think there's that belief in that team. I saw them when they came to Hamilton. They were down 2 scores late in that game, and they still believe that they can come back and win. But like I said, I think going forward, it's still all about the health of Trevor Harris, because Trevor Harris is healthy. I think this is a top 3 team in the league, and they've shown that so far this season. But you have to have that passing game element in this league to be able to keep up with the best teams. And I think, if they don't have that going forward, I think that is really what's going to doom them. But ultimately, so far so good, 4-0, and we'll have to see how that plays out in terms of the quarterback situation going forward.
Yeah, just surprised. And we talked about this with Shea and everything, but having the older quarterback, the older immobile quarterback, and injury history, and that you'd have Shea Patterson here. And I know he's been in the league a couple years now, but still pretty green. I just don't know. Did you keep Dolegala? I mean, to me, this is the big glaring thing right now, and you got to at least deal with this for another 5 weeks, and then God forbid Harris comes back, and then you got to keep him healthy. Like, I don't know. I mean, really impressive right now with how Saskatchewan's looking. So obviously the quarterback is the biggest thing in any of this, but it's just, in spite of all that, for them to be playing the way they are, just stinks here that they got a backup that we still have so many questions in.
Yeah, it's insane how they went into the season with maybe not insane, but it was very interesting that they decided to go in this direction at quarterback, cut Mason fine, don't bring back Dolegala, and go with Shea Patterson, who's kind of a guy that's bounced around in the CFL. I think he was with Montreal. I think he was with BC, if I'm recalling correctly, a couple of other teams. So I think, it's really surprising to see a guy like that ultimately win the backup job, especially because you've seen him in other leagues and not overly impress you. So I think at the end of the day, like I said, it's just, I haven't seen anything from him yet to make me fully buy in to say, oh, this guy could be a player in this league for, a number of years. So I'm really waiting and seeing with him still.
Yeah, like so here for the trust factor here, like Saskatchewan, their defense, like if I'm at home, maybe the defense can kind of hang around, right? Can kind of hang out and be a part of me. They can part of the deck. Toronto, I might be here getting ready to change the door codes. I might be ready to kind of keep them out. I gotta be I don't know. Are you less down on Toronto here after this loss, or are you just like we really? But I don't know. It's not even the Chad Kelly. Like we're waiting another week or two. I mean, this is half the season. I guess what's your welfare check on Toronto right now as we go into week 5, and then right where they're playing with the Montreal here over the weekend.
Well, I definitely think it's gone downhill since the first couple of weeks of the season. I believe, they started 2-0. Now they've lost the last 2. Montreal on the horizon on Thursday. Do not like their chances of going into that environment and winning that game. So, I mean, they're looking at 2-3. They got Hamilton the week after. Hamilton has a bye week this week. And then finally, but what you call it? I think Toronto's going to have their hands full the next couple of weeks. And, as long as, this quarterback situation is kind of shaky right here, I think, they have a really great rest of their team. I think I have no doubts in their talent level of this roster, but I think at the end of the day, the quarterback position is just so important. And, if he's going to play like this, and if they're going to throw Nick Arbuckle in there, do a 2-quarterback system, barely ever works out. So we'll have to see how it shakes out. And the next couple of weeks are going to be very, very crucial for them.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I know Mike had, and I read and shared this article, and I know that I don't know. I mean, Dinwiddie isn't one to panic, and I know he's frustrated. I think they called it it wasn't like an embarrassing loss. They called it, because I tweeted it out. They called it like a frustrating. Do I even have it here still? Demoralizing turn. That's what it was. And so, I would co-sign that, right? I would co-sign it was a demoralizing loss, but like, I don't know if he cut bait on, like, Dukes has looked so good here the first couple weeks. And like, maybe it is just Sass coming in there. I don't know. Looking forward, and then we'll round out here. Just a couple of minutes left. Toronto, Montreal here. So I don't know. I see BC defense taking care of business against Patterson. You think Winnipeg over Calgary, and then who you got is Edmonton. Are they finally able to get a win here against Ottawa? Because that would be scary otherwise.
Yeah, I think Edmonton finally does get it done there, but, I've been wrong about them before. And I think, especially them coming off the bye week, they really have no excuses. They have the desperation. They've looked pretty good in pretty much every game this year. So I would like them. And I think they've, in general, looked better than Ottawa so far this season, despite the record. So I think at the end of the day, Edmonton, I would pick to win that game, but don't have much confidence in that.
Do you think that, so now, I mean, you're pretty on par or on point that Hamilton's the worst team in the league right now?
Yeah, I think you have to say it just because the defense has been so bad this year, and it's just shocking to see how bad they really have been. I didn't think the defense for them was going to be any kind of world-beating defense going into the year, but to see them play at such a low level and to see the offense kind of shockingly surprise in a good way so far this season and still be 0-5 after 5 weeks, I think it's just really demoralizing at this point, and could be a long season in Steeltown.
Yeah, it's like there's a thing for the Mariners a lot where there's like the 3 switches and like, okay, if you're hitting good offense and one of them will turn off, right? It's like, okay, starting pitching's good, bullpen's good, but then we can't play defense. We can't, like, here it's like offense is good, Bo Levi's healthy, defense is terrible now, right? Like Hamilton just can't seem to kind of get it all together that way. We'll see. Like I said, this should be a good weekend. I had John Lewis, friend of the show, complaining live. He's watching old movies this summer because there's no football to watch. I'm like, you'd rather watch Terminator 7 or whatever versus like the CFL right now. Like, let's watch some CFL if you want to do it. I mean, they've been good, but I appreciate it. Like I said, like and subscribe. We'll figure out. We'll be back at least to do the recaps at least next week, and then that might be a questionable there, the 22nd and the 29th, because we got Lake, and then we'll figure it out. We'll keep you posted. We might take a little sabbatical here, but Jason, I appreciate it. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think it was another great week, another great recap, and let's put this one to bed.
Yeah, BC, I would have liked a better game against Hamilton. I mean, I wanted to win, but I didn't want to win. But it didn't make me feel any better about the Mariners' loss. So if that makes you feel any better, I was still equally upset that the Mariners lost.
Yep, baseball season, full swing. They're in first place right now. I don't really keep up with baseball too much right now, but last time I checked the standings, the Mariners were in first place in the division, right?
Somehow immaculately we are somehow Palpatine returns, and somehow immaculately we are still in first. We'll see you guys next time. Take care. Thanks.